Another Wednesday is come and gone, and I've got some comics. Let's talk about them. Hey, welcome to 9 Panel Grid. This week, we've seen fundamental flashbacks, flabbergasting fables, and the good deeds of fiendish demons. But we're going to kick things off this week with Absolute Batman number 4, written by Scott Snyder with artwork by Gabriel Hernandez Walta. This was a really fun issue as it really kind of takes almost like a year one approach for the absolute version of Batman and condenses it down to like basically one issue. That's a trying task for any kind of writer and artist to take on, but this duo really does a fantastic job with it. Starting with Gabriel's artwork approach here, I love his style to begin with, and it makes so much sense for a different artist to take over when we're working with a flashback of a character. Tonally, it doesn't like take you out of the story, and with those changes with different artists, especially the stylistic changes between Dragotta and Gabriel Hernandez Walta, it still fits within that world. I love how you see the changes of the suit and the different approach that Bruce tries to take as he learns lessons and really tries to develop what this Batman is going to be for this all new absolute world. Scott Snyder does a really good job crafting the story too, as he takes you through this journey of young Bruce right after the murder of his father, all the way through the culmination of becoming Batman and really finding out what it means to be Batman and how he needs to change and grow. And in the, classic Snyder way, he usually pulls on things from the past here to show things in the future. In the past being that young Bruce is building a bridge, working on a project, and really coming to grow a love for like the idea of a bat and how unique of an animal that is. And that really tells the story of how he chooses the bat later on in life to become the Batman. Really great story structure. And again, the artwork just totally made sense for this issue. I loved it. All right, next book up is All New Venom number 2, written by Al Ewing with artwork by Carlos Gomez. I just didn't really have a lot of fun with this book, as the premise is, I don't know, we're just supposed to be finding out who this new Venom is, and I'm not getting too much more from the story here. I feel like everything is done like with a real tongue-in-cheek kind of attitude, and it can be done in a fun way, but it's just I'm not along for that ride. It's not fun to me to go on this journey. And it's just not working for me. The one thing that is working for me is that the artwork is really beautiful here. I really like what Carlos is doing within the pages of this book. Venom looks like the big hulking mass that he should, but it's a very stylistically different approach than other artists have taken with Venom. It's very sleek and very clean looking, which is cool because that makes it different than all the other versions of Venom that we've seen in the past. But overall, again, it's the story is built on the actual who is the new Venom, idea, and that's really thin to begin with. And then when you look at the scope of what's happening outside of that, they're really not building out into what that story is going to be and how these characters are all working together. They all seem to be kind of like in on the joke, but also they're part of the joke. So it's really weird. It's really kind of convoluted, and it's really just not working for me. Sticking around with the Spider-Verse, let's talk Amazing Spider-Man number 65, written by Joe Kelly with artwork by Kafu. So this is a good continuation off of the story where Peter is still the champion of Earth and he's still fighting the minions of Sidorak. However, something felt a little bit bizarre with this issue. It felt like almost out of character. I feel like the writing approach here for like 80% of the book really worked for me and I was really along for the ride. And then the tail end hit, and granted, you could magic wand this away, especially because Peter is dealing with so much magic within this part of the story arc. But like something happens where his attitude, his tone, and approach totally shift to something that feels totally out of character and feels unearned for both the issue and the story at large so far. The other part is that Kafu, while I really enjoy him as an artist, I really enjoyed what he did on the pages of Iron Man with Christopher Cantwell. I feel like he isn't bringing something to the book that I really end up enjoying about the character of Spider-Man. There's really, you have to have a lot of kinetic energy. You have to have a lot of, really nice, crazy poses for a character like Spider-Man. It really brings it to life and really brings a lot of energy to the book. And Kafu is really kind of like drilled down into a more realistic approach where there's a lot of figure work and it feels like it's very grounded. Great art, just not necessarily the art I was looking for out of this book. So overall, honestly, with the new creative team taking over here for this arc with Peter as the champion, this is probably the weakest issue that I've read so far. Next up, let's talk Aquaman #1, written by Jeremy Adams with artwork by John Timms. This was a really cool introductory issue to a character that I don't have a lot of history with, and I'd be willing to bet that there's a lot of people out there that don't have a lot of history with this person. Arthur Curry is kind of introduced, it hits a big action set piece. I kind of love that. We have a good explanation of his powers, his relationships, both with the Atlantis and with the JLA, and just with Earth in general. It does a lot of heavy lifting in this one issue in a really nice, compact way that makes it totally understandable for a new reader. That's not to say that it's not enriching for DC heads, people that have a lot of history and knowledge of what's been going on, especially recently, because they do reference a lot of different things that if you haven't been tuned in to DC All In and maybe Absolute Power, you might have a couple questions, but I don't think it's anything that's not going to be able to be overcome from a new reader. Now, as the issue went on, I did have a couple problems with how things were going. It felt like the pacing was just a little bit off. We had a lot of action, a lot of exposition, and then the ending hit. So it was kind of like waning on me, and I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this. The ending hit though, and it delivered a cliffhanger that was really kind of enticing. I really want to see where they go with this, because this could mean that Aquaman is a much larger scope for the story and the book and the meaning for the DCU moving forward. So I'm excited to see what all that means. And because of that, it definitely made this one of my top picks. All right, let's talk Cruel Kingdom #1 from Oni Press with a variety of writers and artists. I had a lot of fun with this book, if I'm being honest, and I feel like I was tricked a little bit with the other EC properties that Oni's put out, as I feel like issue #1 really like kind of hit the mark for me in all of them, and it was diminishing returns from there on out. What I can tell you is that this one hit the mark yet again. I don't know where it's going to go from there, but with the nature of it being an anthology series, hey, if you only get one good issue, that's fine. You're not missing out on anything necessarily. It just might not take you along for a ride long term. What I really liked is kind of like the playful fairy tale takes that they've had on certain properties that you will absolutely immediately see and know and recognize, and how they twist some of those things on their head and make them something totally new and different. There's a lot of different like tropes that they play with, like, sometimes with the hobbits, sometimes with like, the seven dwarfs kind of fable like that. The very first story by Greg Pak, though, was really the standout, as it takes sci-fi elements and the fantastical elements and really melds them together in a fantastic way. I really liked how they played against one another, and it wasn't just something that was shoehorned in. It felt natural and it felt of that world. And of course, with it being an EC property, you always get that twist at the end, and I think the twist was totally worthwhile. So overall, Cruel Kingdom hit the same marks that every other EC #1 did for me. All right, let's talk Daredevil Unleash Hell #1, written by Erica Schultz with artwork by Valentina Pinti. So, right out the bat, let's go ahead and say this. It's a red band book, comes polybagged. There is nothing about this book that is red band. I was disappointed by the notion that it was billed that way and not something that was even inherently delivered in the same manner. It felt like a run of the mill Marvel book. And that's not to say it's a bad book, but if you're telling me it's one thing and you're not delivering that one thing, well, then you're kind of lying to the consumer. I kind of don't appreciate that, and it seems to be Marvel's trend nowadays. In regard to the story itself, I do feel like Erica Schultz has a really good voice for the character of Elektra. I like that, she's really played with the notion of Elektra being Daredevil, and I think that she's probably done the most character development for her in that role, since she's kind of taken on the mantle. What I didn't necessarily like is that, again, this was a red band book, and Erica Schultz has done other miniseries with this character, but I feel like she's been paired with artists that made way more sense, specifically Michael Dowling on one of the miniseries that they worked on. It was a real gritty, really textured kind of approach to the artwork that was very much akin to Malieve, where Pinty's approach is definitely more cartoony, more playful. And when you have that, and you have already the expectation of a red band approach here, which is going to be more mature, more violent, just more, it didn't hit that mark for me. It was a pedestrian issue that sets things up to where it could have a lot of fun with it, But again, the artistic approach totally kind of like drew me out of my expectation for what we could have gotten. Next up, we have Death of Copra #1, written and drawn by Michel Fiffe. So I thought I could dive into this, not necessarily having caught up with Copra, but having a good understanding of what the world delivered and what kind of characters we had. And I guess the first thing right off the bat is that no, I definitely need to dive back in and really understand and get caught up with this world to fully grasp what is happening now at the end game of the world of Copra itself. It did its best job to catch you up, but when we're talking close to 50 issues worth of information that you need to kind of like deliver to a reader to get them to the point where like now they're dealing with the end game, it makes it a really difficult proposition. That's not necessarily a critique on the book so much as it's a critique on myself, though, because I'm the one that's reading this without having the knowledge of what's happened in the previous 30 ish issues. What was cool is seeing how Michel Fiffe's artistic approach has grown and changed. I should say it more evolved as time has gone on. It's still the same approach that we've gotten from the very get go, but I do love seeing how his storytelling tactics have really kind of like grown and like really become very mature as time has gone on, because he's been working on this for years and years at this point, but he still comes with that same very unique Fife approach here, where it looks like there's a lot of different mediums that are being played with, where whether it could be watercolor or just like color pencil on a book. I love his artistic approach on here. That was really the selling point of this book, and that's what made me want to dive in now, even though I'm not caught up, which again, failing on my part. But what I can say is that it is worth it just for the artwork alone, but I definitely intend to catch back up so that I can be on the same page when issue 2 hits. And with our next issue, let's talk Geiger #10, written by Jeff Johns with artwork by Gary Frank. This is one of those issues that is like an incredibly slow burn type of issue. There's not a lot that happens, but there's a lot to appreciate with what you do get with the issue. First and foremost, it's one of those things where you don't really appreciate what you have until maybe you don't have it. Well, that was the issue with Gary Frank, as he's taken a couple issues off here, and now he's returned to the book. And man, seeing his artwork again within the pages of Geiger, it just makes it so much better. Like, it's, you don't appreciate when you get it so regularly, and then when you get it back, you're just like, oh, I needed this in my life. The other thing, and this is true for not just this issue and not just Geiger, but everything within the unnamed universe, it feels like the circle is closing and everything is getting closer and closer to being a connected universe now, as everything is getting ready. It's like we're at a fever pitch and we're at the convergence point now where all of these characters are going to be crossing over. And in this issue specifically, we get Junkyard Joe. It's really awesome. I love the fact that they can play with all of these different things. And again, they're getting closer and closer to being something that is a unique universe here that is all together, all whole within the pages of an Image comic book. It's almost like the first Image universe that we've had in quite a while. So I love the ideas that they're playing with. There's not a lot of heavy lifting that they do in this issue, but I feel like they're setting up the stage for something to come down the, down the pipeline here in 2025, and that's going to be really exciting. Next up, we have Juvenile #2, written and drawn by Jesus Oriana. I got to be honest, this came really close, like really, really close to being top comic of the week. I enjoyed the heck out of issue #1, and issue #2 just built off of every single thing that I enjoyed from that introductory issue. The artwork approach is unique. It's very different than I feel like what we get most of the time from comic books, where there's really thick lines and it's a realistic but caricatured approach to everyone that's in the pages of this book. But in doing so, everyone is so expressive and emotive, and like you feel like each one of these characters are true to what is being expressed by the words that they're saying or the thoughts that they're thinking. You see it on their faces. Sometimes you don't get that with very static looking people, or like kind of like the comic booky approach that you get with like a super heroic character. These feel like real people as opposed to the superhero people that we get from like the big two. Really appreciate that. This is something that is going to be building this world out now, as the assumptions that I made from issue #1 kind of come to fruition now in issue #2, as the notion of this virus that affects teenagers that could kill them potentially when they reach 21. Well, maybe the virus isn't something that truly exists. And maybe there is more, I don't know, dastardly machinations in the background, whether it be by the government or by society at large here, that they're trying to hold things back here, potentially superpowers. It's really cool. There's still a lot to explore here, and that's really the biggest boon and bust of this series, is that this is only a 5-issue series, and I feel like we have so much more to explore, but we got to take it issue by issue. What I can tell you is that issues 1 and particularly issue number 2 were fantastic. And with a new book from the team of 8 Billion Genies, let's talk Lucky Devils number 1, written by Charles Soule with artwork by Ryan Brown. The premise of this book really kind of unfolds as the issue goes on, as we're with this duo of people who are just having a heck of a day. Nothing seems to be going right, and every single time that something doesn't go right, they kind of give in to their impulses a little bit, and they kind of give in to the worst parts of human nature. And as that issue and their day goes on, you're living with them, and it seems to be that they're going to be the main characters of this story, and they're gonna be the people that we follow. But as the issue also evolves, you start to see that there's demons, there's devil characters, if you will, that are really kind of playing out why these bad things are happening. And as the issue unfolds, you learn that these devils have a unique premise, which is they are supposed to make people make bad choices to inherently make the earth worse. And by doing so, the more times that they make the world worse, then they basically gain power within hell. But these devils have some tricks up their sleeve, and maybe they're not as evil, or maybe the scope of the thing that they're trying to do is a little bit different than the premise that we were initially delivered. I like that Charles Soule is playing with ideas and kind of twisting them on their head. I feel like he's done like a really good job with that, specifically in the prior series that I was talking about, 8 Billion Genies. He could be playing with some really cool ideas with that here as well, but it's going to be something that needs to kind of grow and evolve, as the premise, once you kind of figure out what's happening with this book, you're too far into the book for it to really get its hooks into you like really deeply. But like that little notion, that little inkling of what could be coming down the pipeline could be enough to pull you back. For me, I'm kind of hit and miss. I'm teeter-tottering on whether or not I liked this or loved this. I definitely did like it, but I think I need a couple more issues to kind of see how this is all going to play out. Next up, we have Magik number 1, written by Ashley Allen with artwork by Jermaine Peralta. I was kind of pleasantly surprised with this book, as it seems to me that the most successful books within the line of X-Men books are the solo titles. I'm really liking Psylocke, I'm really enjoying Phoenix, and now Magik is another one I can add to that list, where I was just like, whoa, okay, I'm having a lot of fun with this in ways that I'm not having fun with the team books of X-Men. This really plays on the duality of the character of Magik, as her time, like in the Krakoan era of X-Men, there was really a hard split basically between Magik and the demonic portion of her character, as she was basically gave up her ownership of Limbo and all the demonic powers that came along with that. It's not part of her at all anymore. But now we're seeing when she gave that up, there could be maybe potentially an evil side, a demonic side to Ileana that we didn't necessarily know about, that is able to maybe run rampant now at this point. So I really like that they're playing with the duality of the character, the nature of the character, and how that's going to really play out, considering that she spent most of her life now, being part of Limbo and being under Belasco's rule and being a demonic character. So it's going to be an interesting back and forth with how they play with that. Jermaine Peralta really brings a naturalistic look to the book. I like that it's not an overly stylized book. It's not incredibly cartoony. It's not incredibly realistic. I feel like he walks this razor thin line that delivers just what I would want from a book with the things that I was just talking about. So overall, again, pleasantly surprised, not overwrought with a bunch of continuity things that you need to know about from the X books as they are right now. And it delivers just what you need for an introductory issue. All right, next up, let's talk Transformers number 16, written by Daniel Warren Johnson with artwork by Jorge Corona. This issue was a little bit tough for me, as it lacked a lot of the excitement and the story elements that I feel like we've gotten from the last 2 or 3 issues of Transformers. This one felt like it was a little bit disjointed. We jumped around a lot from a lot of different characters, whether they were the Autobots that went to Cybertron or Optimus as he continued his fight as Starscream kind of like, came back into the fold as he was, kind of like joined on to one of the G.I. Joe vehicles. We got really jumpy and it made this issue kind of lack focus for me. I didn't know where I needed to be, kind of like making sure my head was on a pivot, because at a moment's notice, I had whiplash as I was trying to go over to another place and then another place and then another place. That's not to say it was a bad issue, but like in comparison to those other three issues, it just didn't live up to that same hype that those had for 22 pages. Now, what I can say about this issue, though, is that while it didn't live up to hype on 21 of those pages, there is one page on this that really gets me excited. Is it enough to say that this was a fantastic issue? Maybe not. But as far as endings go for the Energon universe and for Transformers, it's definitely going to be something that's worthwhile, and it's definitely going to be something that makes the next coming issues here really, really exciting. Okay, let's talk Ultimate Black Panther number 12, written by Brian Edward Hill with artwork by Stefano Caselli. Just like this whole series has been, it's a slow burn kind of issue, but I feel like this issue actually cranks up the dial a little bit more here. So maybe we're not as slow burn as we have been, but what happens is that crank up turns out to be a little bit of a switcheroo that's delivered within the pages of this book, maybe just a little bit. But it's kind of fun to see that switcheroo because it's not something that is just pulling the rug out from underneath the reader. It's doing so with intent and it's doing so with purpose, because it really plays into one of the things that they've been building out within the pages of Ultimate Black Panther, which is that vibranium is not just a metal. In fact, vibranium might be a living thing, a sentient thing that has feelings, has ideas, and has ambitions. And I think what we're seeing here is that T'Challa is definitely being influenced by the vibranium, and people are starting to realize it, maybe even himself. The culmination of this issue plays off of the idea of the switcheroo that were delivered as we see what really happens in the real world based on what T'Challa was experiencing through the influence of the vibranium. And you can still see the level of control maybe that he has, or lack thereof. What ultimately comes out, though, is that the world is definitely changing and growing within the Ultimate Universe and within the pages of Black Panther, as things are really coming to a head now. We're at a fever pitch. We're definitely getting to a close to what it seems like with the war between Wakanda and the Moon Knight character. So we're getting pretty close to what I feel like is going to be a satisfying end here. Time will tell on that, but for this issue, I feel like it delivered a lot of things that I was expecting and quite frankly needing from this book. And next up, we have Uncanny X-Men number 8, written by Gail Simone with artwork by Javier Garron. This one kind of feels like it put the nail in the coffin for me, as I really was, I was really enjoying Uncanny X-Men, and I feel like it was really one of the flagship titles within the X books. It was maybe the one that I was gaining the most enjoyment out of, but it's been waning on me just a little bit. And with its crossover with Jed McKay's X-Men and the raid on Greymalkin, I feel like it's fallen flat on its face. This book feels convoluted. It feels like check boxes are driving the story here. It's like, we need to do this and we need to get this character here, and I don't care how they do it, just make sure it happens. The characters are making choices and saying things that feel out of character and they feel out of place in the story, and I don't feel like it has anything to do with what's happening besides getting from point A to point B. The characters are not driving the story is driving the character, and that's inherently false and wrong. I'm struggling through all these books here, and it's gotten to the point now where I'm kind of done with the struggle. I think I'm going to be dropping these team books here for the X line moving forward. And with our runner-up book of the week, let's talk Batman Dark Patterns number 2, written by Dan Waters with artwork by Hayden Sherman. Again, another fantastic outing of this book, as I feel like there's a lot of elements that are just working so well within the pages here. First and foremost, it is clinically eerie. everything feels so grounded and feels real within like the world that DC sets for Batman specifically as a character and Gotham as a city. As we're dealing with a younger Batman who's trying to still kind of, get his feet on the ground here. He's been established. He's been Batman for a while here, but that's not to say that he's perfect. And he definitely makes some failings here, but he also knows why he makes those failings and he understands how things came to transpire the way that they did. This one, he kind of comes toe to toe with the wounded man, makes some mistakes, and has to hand him over to the character that you probably are least likely to want to hand him over to, as there's definitely going to be some machinations that come down the pipeline, probably from those two specifically. The thing that really, I don't know, makes this book special for me, or this issue special for me specifically, are two factors. The coloring is absolutely great. I feel like Triona brings a look to this book that's where it like there's a lot of cityscapes that she's working with, and it could get incredibly muddy incredibly quickly, and it never ever does. Everything is really colored with a really great palette. Everything pops, but it's not in a vibrant way necessarily. It's in a way that really kind of develops a really great foreground, middle ground, and background in a way that's not, again, not muddy. You don't lose any detail, and every detail that you truly need really pops off the page. The second part is the lettering here. The lettering is done so in a really magnificent way here, specifically the narration from Batman, as it's something that plays into one of the things I was just talking about. This is a younger Batman. This is a Batman that's not necessarily in his prime and has been doing this for like decades. This is a Batman still early on his career, pre-Robin, probably. And you can tell so by the lettering here. There is the way that the lettering is done. There's a journalistic way that the caption boxes are used here. It looks like it's maybe pages written out of a journal. The other thing is that the lettering choices here, you can see it's very much, there's a capital letter and then lowercase letters. It makes it feel though that as though it's coming from a less mature version of Batman. It looks like it's coming from a younger Bruce and a younger Batman. You feel it as you're reading the actual words here, as opposed to just understanding it by hearing the words, that as you read them or understand them in your head, you see them visually. And those two things combined sets you in the world proper where we're supposed to be, right there with Batman and with Gordon and with the Wounded Man. Again, the entire team is really doing fantastic things in this book here. The combination of all of the capabilities that they bring are really making this an absolutely fantastic and special book. And with my top comic of the week, let's talk Kaya number 24, written and drawn by Wes Craig. There was a lot of things that they packed into this issue here, as everything has kind of been a little bit, it's not a slow burn necessarily, but we've gotten little pieces of the story here that's been working towards drawing Jin and Kaya apart, but also bringing the mechanical forces in as they've now captured Jin. And Kaya is now trapped basically within the ghost city, as she was told to definitely do not go to. What they do in this issue is incredibly fast paced as far as action goes, but they have a lot of dense things that they need to explore within this issue. There are levels of betrayal in this book that happen at many different places from many different characters on many different levels. I love how the story pacing figures out how to tell all these things here within 22 pages, and they do so in a really magnificent way. The colors on the book, too, by Jason Wordie, really great. They pop off of the page here as you're kind of ping-ponging back and forth. You're with Razel and Kaya within the ghost city, which is really ghastly. There's a lot of like nice greens and light blues as they play off of the idea of ghosts. But you're ping-ponging back and forth between the robotic camp as Jin is captured here, and his robotic overlord is basically telling his evil plan to the captor, because he knows that there's no way he can get out. But things definitely do take place there where he is able to maybe figure out a way to get out of there. When it comes to the coloring of that campsite, though, you get a lot of nice yellows, not a nice like bright colors that come through. It's definitely working with the warm palette. So those two things working back and forth, great color theory that's in the pages of this book. At the end of this, It really makes you question what you thought you knew about each and every character within the pages of this book, though. There's a lot of things. This issue is a turning point in a way that I didn't see coming. And when I read every single issue of Kaya, and I believe that I'm a lover of this book to the level that I am, to take me by surprise like this makes it so much more rewarding. Like, he subverted expectations that I really didn't anticipate happening. And that's kind of the kind of craft that Wes Craig brings to a book like this. It was stunning. It was awesome. It was a wild ride, and it was absolutely worthy of Top Comic of the Week. So that's what I've got for you this week, but I'm more curious. What did you read, and what were your thoughts? Do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe, and be part of the panel. Leave me a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you next week.